Tuesday's edition of NBL Now after what was a bizarre, dramatic and crazy old night here in the Hungry Jacks NBL. We've got all of those results to talk about and big injury news that has just landed this morning. I'm Jack Heverin. John Casey joins me fresh off last night's win for the Adelaide 36ers over Illawarra and, of course, Melbourne beating New Zealand. Case, it was just one of those nights last night.
Never a dull moment in the Hungry Jacks NBL, Jack, as we have learned to come accustomed to just dramatic scenes in New Zealand. Chris Goulding doing it again. And, of course, in Adelaide, you couldn't look away. There was the brouhaha in the first quarter, and it just got bigger and better from there. And I was just really happy the 36ers were able to hold on and get the win and taking nothing away from the Illawarra Hawks, who fought back from 25 down to have a shot at their forcing overtime. But it was just such an emotional night in Adelaide, retiring Daniel Johnson's singlet. And, of course, the sad passing of Darryl Pearce, just all the emotion in the house. I don't think the fans or many people could have, got through it if the Adelaide 36ers had coughed up that league.
Shout out to DJ as well. A great honour, one that he absolutely deserves. And we'll talk a little Darryl Pearce before the end of the show. 34 points in the first quarter for Adelaide, 29 in the second. Watching at home, Case, it felt like Adelaide knew they had to win. And their margin for error is so small right now if they want to make the play-in that they can't afford many losses. I thought it was great watching them last night and seeing what it meant. How did it look courtside?
Well, again, you just didn't know it was so, the fluctuations in the game was so absurd. The Adelaide 36ers had their highest scoring first half of the season and then came within 1 point of their lowest scoring second half of the season. And I queried Coach Mike Wells post-game about those fluctuations, and he said he put it down to bad coaching. Now, I think that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek because, he was doing the best that he could. But it still remains a problem for the Adelaide 36ers, and you just can't get a read on them at the moment. Their best is clearly good enough to win the whole thing. But I don't think there's too many teams that are going to be afraid of playing Adelaide in a 3-game series. Yes, they may not want to come to Adelaide and face them in a play-in game, in a one-off scenario. But Adelaide just haven't shown yet, and they're still on the improve. Sunday Detch came back from injury, and that helped them a lot, and he'll be better for the run. But I just don't think they see enough in Adelaide at the moment to fear them over a 3-game series. They can't be consistent enough in games, and they just seem to go away from what works. I mean, Isaac Humphries, I know he had foul trouble, but he did not score in the second half. DJ Vasiljevic did not score in the second half. He took one shot in the second half. Latmayan did not score, full stop. So I don't think you can win consistently with those type of fluctuations.
Okay, so with that said, and the great points, with Adelaide, it's not physical, is it? It's between the ears. Is that the difference between them potentially making a run at this thing or missing altogether?
I think with every team, it's 90% above the shoulders. And clearly the problem with the Adelaide 36ers, because when they're rolling and when the crowd's behind them, and they're unstoppable. But they just can't sustain it, because once things start going wrong, and I guess last night they also had in the back of their minds what had happened in Tasmania on Friday night, where they coughed up that game that they should never have lost, leading by 7 with a minute to play. But we've seen every team do that. We saw Will Hickey at Illawarra throw the ball away, and Cairns getting the result there. We've seen mistakes from people who don't generally make mistakes. So I think, because the league is so tight, because every win means so much, particularly now down the stretch, I think clubs and teams are prone to make mistakes, and it's the team that's going to make the least mistakes, or, as in Melbourne's case, have phenomenal players who can just make big shots and turn the game. They're the ones that are going to succeed.
Let's go to Melbourne in that case then, and let's go to Chris Goulding. 42 points, including the game winner, 10 made threes. He was the difference between winning or losing last night. No question about it.
No question at all. Game breaker, superstar. When he's in your team, much the same as Bryce Cotton at Perth, you're in every game, because he just might flick the switch and knock down those shots as we saw last night. Just incredible. The belief, the capacity to make those shots. And it's not like it's something new. We've seen him do it all the time. And that's why it's going to be so dangerous for teams down the stretch, particularly in a series through the semi-finals, and if they get to the championship decider for Melbourne United, because teams lock in on him and creates more space for his teammates. And Chris Goulding is a great passer. He's happy to sit back and let others score. He wants to win. Love what he does. Hats off to him. We're lucky to have him in the NBL.
I mean, you're the perfect person to ask this because you've called every game that mattered for a very long time. Where are the best shooters that we've had in this last sort of 20 years, Case? Where is Chris Goulding in your opinion?
Look, he's right up there. It's hard to say definitively if he is number one. Certainly right now, proved last season that he was clearly the best in the competition. And again, this season, clearly the best in the competition with what he's doing in terms of knocking down threes. But, we've had some great shooters, and I know we're going to talk about Darryl Pearce because you could make an argument for him being the greatest shooter of all time as well. I think it's a great discussion, a great conversation about who is the greatest. Right now, Chris Goulding is the most dangerous and the greatest three-point shooter in the NBL as we sit here right now.
His team, though, it's just not working for them right now. I think we set really high standards and expectations for Melbourne, and that's not a bad thing, I guess, but they just don't seem to be firing on all cylinders, do they?
No, and that's dangerous for the opposition because when they do, look out, because they're still winning. And that's what it comes down to. And that's why Brian Goorjian has been such a success in the NBL, because he finds a way to win. It doesn't matter if you win ugly. You need results. You need a good position on the ladder, whether it's top two or, get through to the semi-finals without having to go through the play-in tournament. Remembering that no team has played in the play-in tournament and pushed into the semi-finals. So it is a tough gig from there. But Melbourne, I'm not too concerned about them because their best is yet to come. If they can remain healthy, and that's the key because we're going to talk about injury problems, but getting players on the floor and then getting them in sync is what you need to do. And right now, Melbourne are winning and able to win like they did last night. They need to improve, clearly. But in a 3-game series, again, I think that works in their favour. And I'm certainly not writing off the Melbourne team right now.
Well, we mentioned off the top of the show this morning that there is breaking news from an injury standpoint, and it's not great if you're a Southeast Melbourne supporter. They play tonight against Cairns, but before we get there, Derrick Walton Jr., it looked like a very serious hamstring injury on Saturday night. We were in Gippsland. He grabbed straight at the back of the leg and ran straight off the court. We didn't see him for the rest of the night. I think we know why in our case, because it's a season-ending hamstring injury.
Yeah, they've left the door open just slightly that if they get through maybe to the championship game, he might be able to come back. But I guess that's wishful thinking. It's just trying to keep all options open. But look, that's devastating for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. They were a team making a lot of noise. Josh King had got them humming. And his last 5 games before that injury were outstanding. He was averaging 20 points, 5 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and he was turning games. He was back to the Derrick Walton that won the grand final MVP with the Sydney Kings. So that's devastating news for them. And yes, they've got people like Foxwell that can come in and pick up some minutes here and maybe move Nathan Sobey a little bit, but nothing works as well as what was working with Derrick Walton. Proven big game performer. One wonders again about their capacity now, particularly in a 3-game series. Look, I had them rated my number 2 seed before this injury. I've got Perth on top. I think they're the team to beat. And I had the Phoenix in the form that they're in. And given their record against the Hawks, I thought they were the next best team. But without Derrick Walton, well, certainly they tumble down those ratings a little bit.
Yeah, the ladder predictor's now live on nbl.com.au. I spent way too much time on it yesterday. I have them third, but on the same amount of wins as the Perth Wildcats. So it does make you wonder. They play Cairns tonight. Now, thought what Adam Ford said post-game on Sunday was really interesting. Basically said, we're playing with house money from here on in. We know we can't make the playoffs. We know that our season's gone. But we can be disruptors. We can be party poopers. And he used an analogy about clogging up toilets and stuff that I don't think we need to go down and talk about. But does that make them dangerous, particularly on their home floor tonight?
Oh, without a doubt. As you say, they've got nothing to lose. And Adam Ford is really pulling all the levers he can at the moment because they need wins. It's been a disappointing season and yes, mitigating circumstances with the injuries that they've suffered. They just haven't been able to get fully healthy and get everyone on the court at the same time. But that's happened to most teams this season. So, I mean, well, it's disappointing what's been done so far for Cairns. Their wins have been great and they are going to play spoiler. And look, we've seen it where the bottom team can beat the top team. So anything can happen. And I think, for the Cairns Taipans, they're a very dangerous commodity. I think Justin Tatum referenced it last night in the post-game press conference saying about that game against Cairns that they played, that, it's hard to play a team that has got nothing to lose. And they just play with more freedom.
It feels like to me, Case, that there's a Rob Edwards explosion coming soon. I know there's a lot of talk about Taron Armstrong, and as there should be, but it feels like there's a game coming, and it could be tonight, where Rob Edwards lives up to the nickname of the microwave and just completely heats up.
Yeah, well, I think he fits into the category of 90% above the shoulders as well, because if it's his night, he's one of the most dangerous players in the entire NBL, but just hasn't been able to do it consistently. But he is dangerous, and it could be tonight. I won't be surprised if he goes off for 40, but then again, I won't be surprised if he doesn't have much of an influence on the game. And that's the difference between, good players, really good players, and great players. Great players like Chris Goulding impact games, game breakers, win you games, and they do it on a consistent basis. Good players can do it, but just can't do it consistently. They can be shut down by the opposition, or they can have an off night. But no doubt about it, Edwards is certainly dangerous. The Taipans are going to be dangerous no matter who they play. And you wouldn't be surprised if they were able to rattle off 2-3 wins in a row as well and upset the apple cart for a lot of teams.
So that game coming up tonight, 7:30 p.m. But of course, check your local guides. You can see that one on ESPN. Let's finish on a somber note today. That the news came through, and very sad news yesterday that Darryl Pearce, the Iceman, as he's fondly known here in the NBL, two-time champion, 374 games, has his jersey retired by the Adelaide 36ers, and is undoubtedly one of the greatest three-point shooters of all time. Case, it was sad news for a lot of people who have been around the league yesterday.
Sure was. Just stopped you in your tracks. It came up on my social media feed, and my jaw hit the ground. You say that can't be right. Surely that hasn't happened. And look, it's so sad, and condolences to his family and his many friends. And the Iceman was loved here in South Australia, not just by the basketball fraternity, but by the entire South Australian sporting community, because he was part of that Adelaide 36ers legendary 1986 Invincibles, and was such a focal point and such a great player, but also a great person. And I think that should be noted is the fact that while the statistics are there, and he set records in the NBL that will never be broken, and you can make an argument that he is the greatest shooter of all time, just very quickly on those numbers. Shot 42% throughout his career, 900 and plus threes. But he shot 40% plus in all 4 grand final series that he played in. He shot 40% plus from deep at the Olympics when he was there in 1988. And in his last season in 1995, playing with North Melbourne, he went to the grand final series against Perth. He shot 43% from deep. It was just sustained brilliance, remembering he started his career 2 years before the three-point line came in, but just a pure shooter. Here in South Australia, he played state-level basketball at 15 years of age for South Adelaide, unheard of. Had 50 in a grand final for Forestville, knocked down 11 threes in that game. Just outstanding numbers that point to him being arguably the greatest shooter in the history of basketball here in Australia. But teammates I spoke with yesterday and close friends, and I had a lot to do with Darryl going back in those 1980s and through the 1990s. The best thing they loved about him was the guy he was in the locker room. He was he was the funniest guy in the locker room and could diffuse a situation, always got around people, did it in his own style, but a wonderful person. We know he's a wonderful basketball player, but I think, even a better person says a lot about Darryl Pearce, and he's going to be sadly missed. It was just shocking news. And I went to bed last night thinking about it, and the first thing that jumped into my mind when I woke up this morning was thinking about that as well. It just hits hard.
Yeah, as I say, there's going to be a lot of people hurting, and we're thinking of all of you, and we're certainly thinking of the Pearce family during what's a very difficult time as well. Case, always great to catch up. I know you had the late one last night. You backed up early this morning, so thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon on NBL Now.
Look forward to it, Jack. Can't wait to see what happens next.
Oh, my goodness. Cairns and Southeast Melbourne tonight. Who knows? The only way you're going to find out is to check it out. We'll catch you tomorrow on NBL Now.